I'll take you to where it all began. Take you to donde comenzó todo. Todo comenzó. En este rancho, en este cementerio, in this cemetery, this is where it all started. Back in the 1800s, my great-grandfather had a plantation. He had slaves, had children. As the children grew up, he realized that slavery was not the best thing to have. And so he had his son, who was Nathaniel. Playmate was Matilda Hicks, who was a slave.
So the Jackson family, in their home property in Alabama, prior to coming to the Rio Grande Valley, lived in a rural agrarian area, farming. Nathaniel Jackson owned many acres of land and was considered a farmer in Alabama. His life partner, Matilda Hicks, had been a slave on his father's plantation back in Georgia. She was purchased by him as a 4-year-old girl in 1804. And at the time, Nathaniel was 6, and they grew up together on his father's property. And eventually, when Nathaniel became an adult, he was able to get his own property and farm his own land. So Matilda and Nathaniel started to have children in the late 1820s. Starting in 1840, when the Alabama census takers would count slaves on a farmer's property, Matilda and their children were just simply check marks on the census. And so Nathaniel, regardless of how he felt about Matilda and his children, had to consider them as slaves on his property.
To escape slavery, while most people were going up north, New York, Philadelphia, Boston, Michigan, they decided to come south. They knew that in Mexico there was no slavery. So their mission was to come to Mexico.
This family, after they arrived, immediately assimilated into Tejano culture, took on Spanish names so they could blend into the community, learned how to speak Spanish. And in today's world, Spanish is their first language, and they consider themselves Mexican Americans.
We were like, it's called in Spanish a capitolotada, which means a mixture of a lot of things. Yes, it was danger. I remember hearing stories growing up that your grandmother is not all you think she is. Well, what does that mean? Well, one day I'll tell you. Your ancestors, the Jacksons, are what? One day I'll tell you.
And the Jacksons were known at that time to being very benevolent, very caring and very giving to their neighbors and friends. So when travelers would come through wanting to continue on their journey into Mexico, whether they were general travelers or freedom seekers or self-emancipators, the Jackson family community would take them in, they would house them, they would feed them, and if they wanted to continue on their journey, they would assist them across the river from their licensed ferry landing that was adjacent to the property.
My great-grandfather gave these people that were escaping slavery the opportunity to go into Mexico if they wanted to, or to stay here.
And we look at the history of how people were treated along the border. People of color have been treated along the border in Rio Grande Valley of Texas. We're not interested in adding to their family background the history of being African American, because then that would further result in marginalization and discrimination and just ugly feelings overall. So what's nice and exciting about this research today is that we are now in the 21st century. We are 20 years into the 21st century. And these family members are now not only acknowledging their family background, racially speaking, but they're embracing it and celebrating it.
With Martin and Espiridiona Jackson, these are the cornerstone of this place. Out of this couple here, all of my relatives are here. My aunts and my uncles, Tío Bene, Tía Adela, Tío Siquiel, todos están aquí. Perhaps the most influential person in my life next to my parents is my grandmother, Nancy Jackson. She's an incredible woman, raised 3 sons in the early 1900s, and she would tell me stories. 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, she would tell me stories. But she would never complete the story. I want this place to be that shining light for other people here that had to go through what I went through and pick up and write their own story and pick up to where they know. They don't have to be apologizing to anybody. So I tell people, never stop making contact. Never stop telling your story. Because if you do that, they will learn that they have also a story to tell. The border wall, come on. Another division? What does fences do? They just divide people. What does that fence represent? You're not welcome here? Remember, when you go through the checkpoint, they don't ask you if you are American, they ask you if you are a citizen of the United States. Because all of this is America. There's one thing that was taught to me, especially by my grandmother. Be of service to others. And when you present yourself to God, you will be there, and He won't ask you how many cars you have. He won't ask you how many buildings you have. So what did you do for your fellow man? He will ask you. And I will present my body to Him, and I will say to Him, you like what I have done with what you gave me? You like what I have done? This is what you gave me. I will be with you forever.